In the farthest crescent of the wilds, where the wind sings mournfully among jagged spires, we gathered signs of a lurking threat, charred feathers and the scent of burnt flesh. The name Rathalos stirred ancient fear within me, driving me to venture forth alone into the looming dusk. Suddenly, from the smoldering skies above, the mighty Rathalos descended, a magnificent terror, igniting my resolve as I unsheathed my blade. In the farthest crescent of the wilds, past the dune-glass ridge, where the sun beateth like a war drum upon the bones of the world, lies a stretch of broken heaven, called by we who hunt the Windspire Heights. The wind there doth not howl, it singeth, high and mournful, threading through the great spires of rock like a dirge for forgotten titans. We had barely established our camp upon its threshold when signs began to gather. Charred feathers, clawed stone, the stench of burnt meat upon the air. The field commander spoke little, a woman of scars and steel, but she handed me a scroll with one name writ plain in that terrible, trembling script. Rathalos, the name stirreth the marrow. He is not a beast merely, but legend in sinew, the crowned worm, the crimson sovereign, the fire that taketh wing. And so, on the third, the sky was smeared in smoke, and the bones of lesser monsters lay strewn like offerings beneath the boughs of twisted fire trees. It was then, from above, that I heard it, a shriek, ancient and wrathful, as though the sky itself had been pierced by a lance of rage. He descended, wings vast, crimson aflame, his maw aglow with molten spite. The Rathalos. In that instant, the world ceased its breath. He circled the canyon like a war-born comet, then roosted upon the shattered crown of a cliff. He was beautiful and terrible, and I, in silence, unsheathed my blade. He moved swift. For all his might, there was no sluggishness to his form. He came not with hunger, but judgment. Talons struck stone, and fire scorched the very winds. I dove beneath his first breath, a roar of flame that turned sand to glass. We danced o'er cliff and cavern, he above, I below, leaping from ledge to ledge, blade sparking against his iron hide. He answered with fury, each wing beat casting storms. The mantle I wore, soaked with smoke, tore upon jagged stone. Yet still I struck, cleaving into his haunch, sliding neath the arch of his burning tail. My kin in Astera oft speak of the hunt as craft, but here 'twas ritual, a reverent storm. Each blow was a hymn, each dodge a psalm of survival. He soared then, higher and higher, his fury unspent. From above he came crashing down, and I barely clung to the outcrop, my lungs ablaze with ash. I climbed then, with nothing but spite and memory to guide me, chasing his fire into the clouds. At the summit, the storm broke, and so too did he. Upon the highest peak where even birds dare not trespass, the Rathalos made his final stand. We were alone, him and I, beneath the gaze of the twin moons, the clouds seared open by his flame. There, in that cathedral of stone and ruin, I readied my last gambit. Using the clutch claw, I soared from a ledge, pierced his helm with steel, and steered him toward the jagged column that jutted like a blade from the earth. The impact shook the mountain. He reeled, flame choking in his throat. I climbed again, one final charge, and drove my weapon deep into the hollow where wing and spine converge. He bellowed, a sound so great the sky seemed to split. Then all was still. The Rathalos fell, wings folding like tattered banners. His fire guttered, his crown cracked against the stone. His body lay steaming upon the ridge, smoke trailing upward like incense. I stood not in triumph, but in silence. For though the hunt was over, I had slain something eternal. Not a creature, but a right. I returned at dawn. The forge masters took his crown and wove it into helm and mantle, though I wear them seldom. They are heavy, not with weight, but memory. And now I feel the wilds whisper once more, new fire stirreth, new songs beckon, and I am not done. I struck true. My blade found flesh, my claw gripped scale, and blood, black and hot as the heart of the earth, was spilt. The heavens bore witness, and the cliffs did tremble. Yet death did not come, not for him, in that final moment when his wing faltered, and the clouds seemed ready to claim his fall. The Crimson King summoned from the depths of his being one last, wrath-born cry, and fled. A streak of flame across the breaking dawn, he vanished into the veil of smoke and storm beyond the canyon's edge. I gave no chase. My limbs ached, rent by claw and scorched by fire, but it was not pain that stilled me, it was reverence. For as I watched his crimson form dwindle into the wide sky, a strange feeling took root, not of loss nor failure, but of grace. In his survival, I saw no defiance. I saw purpose. The world hath need of such beings, of kings unbroken, of monsters whose song is not yet ended. He spared me perhaps, or I spared him. There was a moment, I swear it, as he vanished beyond the stone spires when his gaze met mine. Not with hatred, not with fear, but with knowing, as if to say, we are alike, thou and I, bound by the wild forged in the furnace of the hunt. And so I returned, not triumphant but silent. They asked, hast thou slain him? I answered only, he is gone. They did not understand, they never do. They will call him again, as all hunters do. And one day another may strike the final blow, but not I. My fire hath met his. That is enough. In the quiet of night I watch the skies. Sometimes I think I hear his wings, distant, thunderous, cutting the clouds, and I smile. Not all monsters must die. Some are meant to endure, as legends, as warnings, as gods. Upon the wind-blown heights I trod, alone, where ash did fall like mourners' ashen snow. The spires like spears through blood-red twilight shone, and silence hung where beasts did fear to go. No song of bird, no whisper from the breeze, but scent of smoke and iron in the air, and claw marks etched upon the elder trees spoke clear. The crimson king had taken lair. He came not as the others come to feed, but born of wrath with kingdom in his eyes, his wings like storm clouds shaped of ancient greed, his roar, the dirge of burning summer skies. I saw him first as shadow scorched with flame, a comet 'gainst the sun, so vast, so dire, and knew at once the beast bore not a name, but title, sky's dominion, forged in fire. My blade I drew with reverence, not with pride, for what is pride when gods of wrath take wing? Each breath I took did whisper, thou shalt die, and still I stood, a candle challenging spring. He struck, the very mountain seemed to crack, each talon swiped a tempest in its path. The ground it bled, the sky it bled, pitch black, as though the stars themselves had felt his wrath. We danced a dance no bard shall dare repeat, with step of flame and counterstep of steel, his eyes twin coals, his breath a furnace heat, and every wound I gave did make him heal. Oh, sweet the pain of battle against such might, the joy of trial, sharp as piercing thorn, to strive against the herald of the night, to test the edge against something nobly born. My sling I loosed, it found his sharded crest. He shrieked and wheeled, a sun eclipsed in rage, and still I rose, though trembling in the chest, to strike again, to write upon his page. He soared, and I with clutch claw leapt to fate, a fragile form upon a godly frame. He spun through cloud, through gale, through bursting hate, yet on I clung, with soul alight in flame. The spines along his back I scarred and marred. I drove my blade where breath and bone aligned. He flung me off. The wind itself was jarred, and down I fell, like leaf from ancient pine. The stone received me not as friend, but judge, and darkness pooled behind my stricken eyes. Yet still I rose, though blood began to smudge, and met once more his stare across the rise. He hovered there, O majesty in wing, a lord, unshaken, bathed in dying light, a crown of fire, a soul that could not sing, yet burned with meaning deeper than the night. We both did pause, as if the world had stilled, and knew the end was writ in either hand. One breath we shared, one moment, full and filled, then broke it fast like glass upon the sand. He charged, and I met him, blade held high, and struck with all that mortal hearts may lend. The steel sang true, yet not enough to die. He faltered, turned, and would not meet his end. He soared, not broken, not in shame or fright, but as a king whose duel hath met its course. His wings caught dusk, a blaze of red and white, and left behind no anger, only force. I fell upon my knees, not out of grief, but wonder, aye, and gratitude as well, for he was more than death and life is brief. But some things live where silence dares not dwell. They asked me then, hast won the crimson crown? And I, with gaze still fixed upon the sky, did shake my head and laid my weapon down, for some victories are not where bodies lie. The wilds are wide, and kings still take their breath, and monsters rise not merely to be slain. I hunted fire and walked the edge of death, and from that edge returned with fire in vain. So mark this lay, Ye hunters yet to rise, not all the songs are sung from beasts that fall. Some kings endure, some fire lights the skies, and I saw the greatest flame of all. When the silver hush of morn had barely touched the sky's pale cheek, and the earth still murmured dreams beneath its crusted veil of ash, Kalin of the bow set foot beyond the lodge. His eyes were flint, his heart a forge. Over his shoulder, strung like the string of Apollo's lyre, hung the carved arc of elderwood, the bow, swift and silent, that sang when gods were watching. He was no paladin clad in steel, nor dragon slayer crowned in hymns of taverns. Nay, he was a sylvan poet of death, whose verse was arrow, whose rhythm was breath. The land he entered was a burnt song. The trees, once verdant with Pan's music, lay blackened as if Orpheus had wept a dirge too long. The very soil beneath his soles whispered in agony, and fissures yawned like Charon's laughter. Yet Kalin walked, not in dread, but in awe, of fire, of ruin, of a beast that knew no equal. For here, beneath the shadow of the elder's recess, the Gravios stirred. Two, of the beast who wore the mountain. O dread-bellied Gravios, thou colossus born of basalt and fury, thy hide was wrought not of hide, but of hardened mountain. Thy breath no mortal wind, but a tempest of slumber and rot. Thou didst slumber in the bowels of the earth as if Hades himself had carved thee in leisure. Kalin came upon thee in silence, crouched mid sulphuric reeds and crumbling slope. The air shimmered with ether's pulse, and heat waltzed with death in spiral columns. Then, thy breath. A tremor, a cough of molten hate, and thou didst rise like a blasphemous hymn to the sky. He did not tremble. Rather, he drew from his quiver a slender shaft, tipped with venom and moonlight, and let it fly into thy plated shank. It sang its tiny song, Wast, a lullaby to the nerves. Thou bellowed then, a roar that shook even the dead from their silent peace. Stones leapt like panicked hearts, and the volcano itself answered with a groan. Third, the ballet of flame and precision. Then came the dance. O, reader of flame-born tales, know this, that the finest hunts are no clumsy rush of blade upon flesh, but poetry in motion. Kalin weaved between death and majesty, his steps as fluid as Hermes in descent, his eyes locked to the window between plate and muscle, where even titans bleed. The Gravios struck, and the world echoed. He countered with flame-tipped arrows, not in anger, but in reverence. The bow bent and loosed with music, first a hum, then a thrum, then a scream as arrows kissed wingfold and tailbase. Yet still the beast endured. A mountain, however wounded, does not fall with a whisper. Kalin drank from a flask of life and rose again. 4. A descent into the mouth of Tartarus. Gravios, seeking slumber, turned toward its infernal nest, down through tunnels where magma wept and stone bled orange. Kalin followed like a cursed Eurydice returned to her grief, the path behind him sealed with ash. The deeper he went, the more the world grew quiet. Even the fireflies here were flame. The silence was sacred. He knocked another shaft, coated this time in a powder of the thunder beetle, and loosed it into the heavens of the beast's ribbed back. The explosion was not loud, but it was righteous. Gravios, in rage, exhaled a cloud of sleep, the gas of Lethe, of forgetting and dreamless doom. Kalin leapt, soaring above the mist as Daedalus might, and from the mid-air peak of flight unleashed a rain shot, a bouquet of arrows, a funeral wreath of blades. V, the final canticle. And then, oh then, as all epics must arrive, came the final moment. Gravios trembled. Its legs, so massive they crushed time beneath them, now faltered like an aged tree. One eye, blood-slicked and dimmed, caught the silhouette of its end. Kalin approached, breathing the heat as though it were incense. He spoke, not aloud, but within. Great beast, thou wert not villain nor evil, only willful, only born for dominion. The last arrow he drew was not poisoned. It bore no trickery. It was plain, carved of yew, fletched with feathers from the elder crow. He loosed. The world held its breath. The arrow struck beneath the chest, where the armor thinned to pulsing flesh, and Gravios groaned a final time, not in rage, in recognition. It collapsed like a chapel, broken yet noble. The tremor rolled into the horizon like a last verse. Ki, the ashen hymn. Kalen stood long after the smoke had fled. He laid his hand upon the beast's side and murmured an elegy in the old tongue, a song older than man, older than even dragons. He did not claim trophies. No, the bow was song enough, the memory sufficient tribute. As he turned away, the wind returned. The sulfur now sang like myrtle. The birds long fled dared chirp again. And so the hunter walked home, not triumphant but changed. Beneath his feet, the ash bloomed briefly with each step, as if life too mourned and remembered. I write this not as boast nor tale of triumph, but rather as testament to what I have seen and what I have become. Mine is a soul burdened not by guilt, but by reverence, sorrow, and a certain dread admiration. If the fire-born Gravios were a monster, it was one of nature's own forging. And what then does that make me? It was early, and the sky had not yet bled its full morning into the world. The light in the elder's recess is strange, more a wound than a dawning, a perpetual reddish illumination like the rim of some hellish eye. I had traveled alone, as I often do. For solitude is not merely my preference, but my penance. My bow, a companion silent and sure, was strung with hair I had gathered myself from the underbrush of the wyvern's path. The arrows in my quiver bore tips laced with extracts of sleep and slow poison. I had prepared them not with haste, but with care, as one prepares letters to a long-lost beloved, with trembling hands and utter conviction. As I descended into the blackened basin of the recess, the heat clawed at my skin, though I wore protection enough. It was not discomfort that pierced me, but apprehension. There is a dread that lives in quiet places where great creatures sleep, and soon I found it. It lay sprawled among stone and sulfur, a mass of heaving obsidian. The Gravios, monstrous and noble, its breath issuing in long, smoking intervals from the vents in its back. It seemed less an animal and more a monument, half living, half geological, a remnant of some early earth. For a moment I dared not act. I studied the creature from behind a jagged wall of glassed rock. Its form so vast and alien, it summoned thoughts of titans. Beings of old who once warred with heaven and then, defeated, sank into the crust. And still I did draw the bow. My arrow sang into the air. It found flesh, or something akin to it. The beast stirred, and the world changed. The Gravios rose, and its bellow was not rage but memory. It cried out like an earthquake remembering its birth. Lava trembled in the veins of the world. My hands, which had not known fear in years, now trembled. Thus began the pursuit. I will not recount each moment in detail. It would be as tiresome to describe every heartbeat in a man's life. Know that I loosed many arrows, each one a thought cast into the uncertain dark. I moved between crags and scorched plateaus, each footstep chosen with care. Gravios fought not with savagery, but inevitability, like the tide or the grave. Once its tail struck the earth where I had stood but moments prior, shattering obsidian like glass. The concussion of the blow hurled me into a wall of basalt. I awoke to pain, thick and bright, and the smell of my own blood. I crawled. I reached for my bow with bloodied fingers and rose again, for it was all I knew. And in that moment I began to understand something terrible. I was not unlike the beast I hunted. I too bore armor, mine not of scale but silence. I too vented smoke from unseen wounds. I had become a relic, a weapon of necessity, forged by solitude. The final moment came like a storm's last lightning. I ascended a ridge and knocked my last arrow, a thin shaft of elderwood fletched with crow feathers. I do not know what coated its tip. I had prepared it long ago, for some unknown but inevitable end. Gravios turned toward me, its breath shallow. Our eyes met. In them I saw not hate, I saw comprehension. I loosed the arrow. It flew like a sigh. It struck beneath its throat, where molten life still pulsed. The beast groaned once, low, endless, and fell. I approached as one walks toward a monument after the earthquake has passed. The earth still steamed, the air full of copper and ash. I placed my hand upon his hide and whispered something I did not recognize. An old tongue, perhaps, or something born of grief and respect. There are those who hunt for glory, others for coin. But I hunt because something in me demands it. And every creature I fell, every arrow I cast, every breath I steal from the mouths of giants, I carry with me. I buried part of myself in the ashes that day, and I am not sure what returned to the surface. Oft, through the crimson hush of dawn I strayed, where vapors kissed the roots of burning stone, and whispering winds through cinders softly played, a world where beast and dream are overthrown. I came not for the crown of man nor prize, but for the ache that silence leaves behind. My bow, a song, my blade, the moon that flies. I sought the soul of fire, untamed, unkind. The stars, those age-worn candles in the sky, had watched me drift from frost to verdant vale. In every hunt I heard a phantom cry, a breath that shaped the storm, the sun, the scale. They call it Gravios, dread of molten deep, whose footsteps thunder through the planet's crust. Within his throat a furnace dares not sleep, his eyes like coals that judge the bones of dust. I made my camp upon the basalt's crest, where heat and time have burned the earth to shell. The recess groaned, a titan in unrest, its veins aglow with tales too dark to tell. My fingers traced the feathered shafts I'd bound, each arrow kissed by sleep, by poison's kiss. The long blade hummed with tension, tightly wound, a fang I'd drawn from some abyssal bliss. The handler bade me pause and turned away, her silence heavy as a tomb unsealed. I nodded, knowing dawn would bring the fray, and with it, truths the stars have long concealed. Downward I slid through smoke's obsidian veil. The air grew thick with ancient dragon's breath. The path was steep, my footfalls faint and frail. Each echo danced beside the thought of death. What music dwells in places dark and lost? What hymn remains where sunlight cannot pass? The walls here bore 1,000 battles cost, each stone a scripture in volcanic glass. I knelt where sulfur ran in rivulets, my hand upon the ground still warm from tread. And there, amidst the silence, rose regrets, as ghosts of fellow hunters filled my head. We were but men, though dreamers in disguise, who dared to mark the tempest with our blades. Now I alone would meet those smoldering eyes, and walk the path where light and courage fades. Then came the rumble, deep and slow and vast, a breath that swelled the caverns into flame. The shadows writhed, the fumes began to blast, and from the smoke emerged the ancient name. Gravios, dread monarch of molten tombs, strode forth with groan and bellow, ash and might. His wings were furnaces, his breath consumes, each step unmade the very laws of night. I froze, how could I not? Before his gaze, which bore the weight of eons none could span. What forge had birthed his spine of magma blaze? What god had shaped this beast more vast than man? But then my soul did answer soft and low. I came to know the flame that birthed my doubt. I drew the bow and let the silence go. My arrow struck, the beast began to shout. He roared, a voice that split the stalactite, and magma poured from nostril, mouth, and skin. I leapt aside, my blade drawn silver bright, and struck where chinks revealed the wrath within. Our battle danced across the seething plain, a waltz of heat and bone and sudden flight. Each clash, a stanza in a brutal strain, each wound a line inscribed in searing light. He cast his fire in cones of screaming hate. I slid beneath, my arrows in a storm. He crushed the rock to sand beneath his weight. I rode the blast, untouched by cinder's form. But who can stand when even gods may fall? He turned and struck. The ceiling lost its hold. A wall collapsed, a darkness like a pall, and blood rose up where once had courage bold. I fell, I burned, I broke upon the stone, the taste of copper, ash upon my tongue. The world spun out. I heard my own low groan, and through the haze the beast's great shadow swung. But I, who'd walked through frozen storms and flame, knew pain's harsh song, and did not bow to sleep. I rose, half dead, and called the monster's name. My grave or yours, O tyrant of the deep. A shaft of frost I loosed from weary string. It struck his flank and slowed his molten breath. I carved his leg with long sword's ringing swing and danced once more with agony and death. He faltered, yes. He stumbled in his pride and roared a curse that shook the very dome. I ran and leapt, and from the creature's side I saw the place where hope and fury roamed. I thought of every beast I'd faced before, each Anjanath and Bareth left behind, but none had held me so within their core as Gravios, the mirror of my mind. Was I not him? A furnace sealed in skin? A hunger barely caged by will and thought? Had I not burned the world from deep within, and with each victory left virtue caught? The final shot, I drew it slow and sure, my fingers trembling on the bowstring taut. It bore the weight of silence I'd endure, and all the wounds that time and grief had brought. It flew, the arrow sang, the beast did rear. A cry escaped that was not rage but pain. He staggered back, then knelt in final fear, and crumbled like a peak before the rain. Species and classification. Gravios is a flying wyvern, known for its massive size and heavily armored body. 2. Habitat. It primarily inhabits volcanic regions, such as the Oil Well Basin in Monster Hunter Wilds, where it can traverse molten lava with ease. 3. Diet. Gravios feeds on rocks and minerals, which contribute to its stone-like armor and internal heat generation. 4. Defensive gas emission. It can emit a potent sleeping gas from its underside, capable of incapacitating hunters and other monsters. 5. Heat beam attack. Gravios possesses a powerful heat beam attack, which can cause significant damage and is a signature move in its arsenal. 6. Explosive gas emission. In addition to sleeping gas, Gravios can release flammable gas as a byproduct of its heat beam and diet, adding another layer to its offensive capabilities. 7. Armor toughness. Its body is covered in extremely hard scales that can deflect most weapon attacks, making it a challenging opponent for hunters. 8. Weaknesses. Gravios is particularly weak to water element attacks, making water-based weapons effective against it. 9. Status ailments. It can inflict various status ailments, including fire blight, sleep, and poison, posing multiple threats during combat. 10. Behavior. Generally docile until provoked, Gravios is fiercely territorial and will aggressively defend its domain when threatened. 11. Evolution. Gravios is the adult form of Basarios, undergoing significant changes as it matures, including the loss of Basarios' poisonous gas in favor of other abilities. 12. Hardcore variant, the Hardcore HC. Gravios is an older, more formidable version, featuring enhanced attacks like a high-speed beam sweep and a powerful tail slam. 13. Size variations. In Monster Hunter Wilds, Gravios can vary in size, with gold crown sizes ranging from approximately 1,869.51 to 2,604.71 units. 14. Quest appearances. Gravios is featured in several quests, including Armor Like a Mountain, Succulent Scraps, and Troublemakers, providing hunters with opportunities to face this behemoth. 15. Material drops. Defeating Gravios can yield valuable materials such as fire cell stones, which are essential for crafting powerful equipment. I remember the wind more than anything, the way it sighed through the high passes of the ice-shard cliffs, brushing the frost from dead leaves like fingers upon the face of a corpse. It was not a harsh wind, nor angry. It felt mournful, as though the mountain itself mourned something it could no longer name. That was the moment I knew I was close. They had warned me of her, Nursilla, the ancient matron of silk and poison, whose lair bloomed deep within the chasms below. They spoke of her not as one speaks of monsters, but of ghosts, half in whispers, half in prayers. I had come not for glory nor coin, though the guild offered both. No, I came for silence, for the kind of hush that follows the end of a story. With me, I carried only what I could trust. My bow curved like the crescent of a morning moon, and my long sword, spinner end, forged from the bones of a Zenogre who once howled lightning into the storm. That weapon remembered death. I hoped it would remember it again. As I passed into the hollow of the cliff, the light behind me faded. I was swallowed by a deeper dark, where no torch could breathe for long. My footsteps slowed. The air grew viscous with damp and rot. Webs adorned the stone like the veins of the world, thick and sticky, each thread thrumming with tremors I could not name. Then I saw the first corpse, a Chenitor, long since drained, its shell cracked open like a rotted fruit. Further in, bones, hundreds of them, some beast, some unmistakably human. I tried not to look at the helms. At what remained of the faces within, I drew an arrow. My breath condensed in the air as I moved deeper into the chamber. The walls breathed around me like the lungs of some forgotten god. I could hear the shift of silk above, a click, a whisper, then silence, and she fell. She descended like a veil of midnight, a silhouette of horror outlined in glistening web, legs curled like scythes, her hide a patchwork of prey she had devoured. Her shell was armored in gypsera skin, stitched to her thorax by her own threads. It swayed as she moved, an effigy of mockery. For a moment I froze, not in fear, but in awe. There was a kind of dreadful beauty to her, the ancient kind, like crumbling statues or blood-stained altar cloths. Her eyes, 8 and yet somehow more, burned with intelligence. Not curiosity, not hunger. Recognition. She knew I had come to kill her. The first strike came without warning. Her stinger lashed out, the venom trailing in a line of violet steam. I dodged beneath it, letting loose an arrow that glanced off her carapace. Another, better aimed, struck the joint in her leg. She shrieked, the sound like silk being torn under pressure. She retreated, skittering along the walls. I followed. We fought in silence, as though the world had no need of words. My arrows sang in the dark, some striking true, some forgotten as they shattered against stone. I danced between her traps, webs like snares drawn taut across the floor. When she vanished into the shadows above, I sheathed my bow and drew spinner in. A blade is a different language. She spoke it fluently. Our duel in the heart of her nest was not a brawl, but a waltz. Every movement I made she mirrored with her own. Every strike was answered with a counter. I bled, she bled more. My sword rang against her chitin, sliding off with sparks or embedding in the softer flesh of her underbelly. Her stinger lashed. Her fangs snapped inches from my throat, and then she vanished again. I stumbled into the central chamber, the nest. Here, the air thickened. Webbing cocooned every surface. It stretched from stalactite to stone, from bone to altar. A dozen monsters hung suspended, their bodies desiccated but intact. In the center, a mass of writhing silk glistened, and from it she emerged, slower now, wounded, yet still regal. She was ancient, not merely old, but truly ancient. You could see it in her scars, the way her legs hesitated just slightly, the way she still favored the side I'd wounded. This was no beast. This was a matriarch, a survivor, a queen of a kingdom built in silence. She raised herself high, the silk rising around her like a throne. I raised my bow. One final shot. I held my breath. Let it go. The arrow struck her through the eye. She screamed, and the walls trembled. But she did not fall. She charged. I dropped the bow, drew the sword, met her head on. The impact hurled me backward. I crashed through a webbed pillar and skidded across the bone-littered floor. Pain lanced up my side. I rose, coughing blood. She loomed, half blind now, her breath labored. I ran to meet her. We clashed in a storm of fangs and steel. I carved into her side. She tore at my shoulder. I ducked beneath her strike and drove spinner end into her thorax. She howled. I twisted the blade. She reared back and collapsed, partially buried beneath her own web. I stumbled, legs barely holding, and then, one last movement, she rose. And with all the strength I had left, drove spinner end into the base of her skull. This time she didn't rise. I stood there heaving, surrounded by silence, a silence deeper than any I'd ever known. It wasn't peace, Not yet, but it was something close, and for the first time in years, I sheathed my blade without fear. But silence, I would come to learn, is not the same as stillness. Even as Nersilla's corpse slackened in death, her webbed empire pulsed around me. The silken walls moaned as if mourning her departure. I could feel the tension in each thread, a collective grief vibrating through the very sinews of the cavern. She had not ruled by dominance alone, but by presence, a stillness so absolute it had become sacred. My limbs ached. My body wept through wounds it had no time to tend, and yet I could not leave, not yet. I approached her body slowly, not out of caution, but reverence. Her legs had folded inward, curled as a dying spider's always did. Her eye, the one I had pierced, gazed at nothing now. Its glow dimmed like a candle devoured by its own wax. I knelt beside her, pressed a hand to her carapace. The warmth had not yet faded. I do not know why I whispered then. Perhaps to honor her, perhaps to forgive myself. You were never a monster. And I meant it. There had been no malice in her, no ambition. Only instinct honed across eons, an art of survival I had interrupted. Yet even in death she retained her grace. I rose and cut what I had come for. Not trophies, not teeth or fangs, but silk, the heart thread, ancient and heavy with memory. It was said that the heart thread of a Nersilla held the dreams of the generation she had devoured. I hoped selfishly that it would carry a trace of me. I wound it into a coil and tied it to my sash. The journey back through the chasm was dreamlike. The echoes of our battle still clung to the air, replaying in hollow whispers. My torch hissed as it kissed damp stone. Once, I passed the husk of an old hunter, his blade long rusted, his helmet webbed in place like a crown of sleep. I bowed my head in passing. He had come here like me, not for conquest, but for closure. The world above had changed when I emerged. The wind was no longer mourning, but restless. The stars above burned with quiet indifference. I collapsed against a stone and watched the dawn unravel the edge of the sky like a ribbon of fire. Only then did I weep, not out of grief, not relief, but because the hunt was over, and I had survived it. And survival, after all, is the loneliest kind of victory. In the years that followed, I never spoke of Nersilla's death. When asked, I gave the same answers others had. Yes, she was fierce. Yes, she was cunning. Yes, it was a battle worthy of song. But I never shared the truth, that I had not slain a beast, but a goddess. That beneath the hollow earth I had found not a monster's lair, but a cathedral built in silk and sorrow. And every night since, as I lie awake with sword at my side and bow within reach, I feel the tension of a thread that still connects us, taut, silent, unbroken, as though somewhere far beneath the world she waits still, not in hatred, but in silence. Within a vault where moonlight dares not dream, I wandered, bow in hand and blade at side. The webs hung low like whispers in a stream, each thread a tremor where the dead abide. No beast of bone nor bellowed wrath was she, but mistress of a monarch's voiceless court, arrayed in hides and husks from history, a tapestry where shattered lives consort. Her limbs like vials plucked the pulsing air, each movement hummed with old unspoken songs. She spun her thoughts in threads too fine to tear, too laced with loss, too tightly wound in wrongs. Her eyes, 8 lanterns dimmed by ancient pain, surveyed me not with hunger but with grace, as if she saw the arrow's crimson stain long ere I drew the string or set my face. She danced and I, poor fool, believed I led, but silk is sly and winding as regret. Each step I took unraveled one she'd tread, and still she moved, unbroken, like a threat. I struck. The blade sang low, its voice a bell that told not triumph, but a mourning knell. She reared and roared and fought the fading spell, then fell, too proud for pity as she fell. Her blood was dark like wine beneath the moon, and sweet with sorrow none could taste but I. No glory echoed in that silent tune, just breathless awe and silence poised to die. What shame it is to call such grandeur prey, a sovereign slain, her altar left to dust, her throne of thread undone in disarray, her silken court abandoned to the rust. I took no prize, no fang, no carven bone, but wrapped one thread around my weathered wrist, a token not of conquest but alone, to mark the hand that once by fate was kissed. Now in the hush where wind forgets to stir, I sometimes feel her pull upon the thread. She does not haunt, nor hate, nor seek to err, but weaves in me the tale I left unsaid. One. First appearance. Nerscylla debuted in Monster Hunter 4, 2013, introducing a spider-themed monster with unique mechanics and aesthetic. 2. Monster type. It belongs to the Temnoceran class, a category of arthropod-like monsters similar to spiders or insects. 3. Venomous attacks. Nerscylla uses poison extensively, delivering it through tail stabs and fang bites, making it a hazardous foe if unprepared. 4. Webbing mechanics. Nerscylla can shoot webbing to trap or mobilize hunters and prey, similar to how a real spider uses silk. 5. Silk armor. It constructs silk armor around its lair and sometimes on its own body, enhancing its defense and giving it a haunting, mummified look. 6. Gravios shell armor. Nerscylla wears the skull shell of a Gravios over its back, an unsettling display of dominance and survival. 7. Sleep and poison combo. It can inflict sleep and poison simultaneously, an especially dangerous combination during hunts. 8. Weak points. Its main weak points are the head and the softer underbelly. The shell on its back is highly resistant to damage until broken. 9. Silken ambushes. It often retreats to high places, then leaps down with a powerful stabbing attack, mimicking a spider's ambush behavior. 10. Environmental interaction. Nerscylla can climb ceilings and walls, changing vertical levels during battle, making it a dynamic opponent. They say Rathian's breath can wilt the leaves from a tree before the fire even touches them, that her scream can boil water in your eyes. But no one tells you about the silence that comes before. That morning, it was that silence that woke me. Not the crack of a branch or the groan of wind, but the lack of them. It was as though the forest had taken a breath and forgotten how to release it. Even the bugs, those constant little symphonies, had fallen mute. I opened my eyes beneath the canopy and felt the weight of the day settle over my ribs like chainmail. Today was her day. Today, I would fight the Queen of the Skies. My bow was already strung, lying beside me like a sleeping dog. The long sword I carried, more ceremonial than practical for most, hung across my back. Its weight wasn't just steel, it was memory, stories, warnings. I set off before the light had fully broken through the leaves. The world still swam in green shadow. I tracked her for 3 days, scorched soil, shattered trunks, carcasses flung like broken puppets across the hills. She circled the southern glade, marked it, owned it, and now she waited for me there. Each step felt predestined, like I'd walked this same path in a dream, over and over. Even the breeze on my face seemed familiar, warm but heavy, like the last breath before the fall. Then I heard it, the low pulse of wings, not above me, around me, through me. I crouched beside a blackened log, knocked an arrow, and waited. Her form came into view a moment later, green and gold, lit from within by her own fury. She was perched upon a ridge, her talons gouging the stone beneath. Her eyes, too intelligent, met mine before I could fire. And just like that, the silence shattered. Rathian launched herself into the air, a living storm. My first arrow flew wide. The second caught her along the neck, but she didn't flinch. Her tail spun low, carving a trench through the earth, and I dove aside a heartbeat too late. Pain lanced across my ribs, shallow but sharp. I scrambled behind a rock, breathing hard. My bow wasn't enough. Not for her. Not for this. She landed with a sound that cracked the air, a great deliberate thud that sent dust and leaves leaping. She roared, a terrible full-throated thing, and began to pace, slow and coiled like a serpent. Her breath steamed in the cool air. My heartbeat sounded louder than her growls. I drew my long sword. Its edge was clean, pale like bone, the result of a smith's prayer and a hunter's grief. It had belonged to my father. He died before ever reaching her nest. I remembered his words as I stood. You don't hunt her, you answer her summons. So I did. I stepped into the open, sword lowered but ready. Rathian turned, pupils tightening. Her wings spread wide, Territorial, warning me. I didn't stop. She charged. I sidestepped, barely avoiding the talons that would have cleaved me in half. My blade flashed across her flank, drawing a line of gold-red blood. She shrieked and twisted, the barbed tail whipping toward me. I threw myself flat, the air above me cracking as her stinger missed by inches. I slashed at her leg. Another roar. She beat her wings once, lifting into the air, and I knew what was coming. The fire. It bloomed from her throat like a second soul, bright, furious, consuming. I dove again, rolling through ash and flame. My coat caught fire at the hem, and I slapped it out with shaking hands. Smoke filled my lungs, but I was still standing. I ran beneath her, sword out, and struck upward with all I had. The blade met flesh at the base of her wing, and for a moment, time paused. Her shriek was pure agony. She crashed down hard, disoriented, and I saw my chance. I leapt, driven by something deeper than rage, and drove the sword toward her eye. But she twisted, and my blade glanced off her cheek instead, sparks flying. Her tail slammed into my chest and sent me tumbling. My back hit a rock. My sword slipped from my hand. Everything went quiet. I coughed. My lungs screamed. The world spun. Rathian loomed above me, bloodied but alive, victorious. Her jaw opened, fire pooling inside. I closed my eyes, then a sound, a snap, a cry, a shock of air as something soared past her. Another arrow. It struck her snout, and her flame sputtered. A figure, small, quick, darted across the clearing, shouting, waving, distracting her. I didn't know who. I didn't care. It was enough. I crawled to my sword, fingers numb, vision blurred. Rathian screamed, her attention torn, and I rose on trembling legs. The world around me faded. Only she remained. The fire, the fury, the crown of the forest. I rushed her. She turned too late. I buried the blade deep beneath her throat. She convulsed, screamed, gurgled, thrashed. Her wings beat once, twice, and then folded. Her great body slumped forward with a sound like a falling mountain. My legs gave way beneath me and I collapsed beside her. Dawn was not yet born, and still I stirred, as restless winds through canopies conferred dark omens in the hush of forest deep, where time like falling petals lay asleep. My bow I clasped, her limbs of ash and horn, whose whisper sang of dragons yet unborn. The longsword slept across my shoulder laid, a silver fang within its twilight shade. Oh, silence vast, thou art a prayer unspoken, a calm before the ancient vows are broken. The moss beneath did throb with haunted breath. The air was drunk with foretaste of a death. And in that hush, the world began to turn. The sun a smudge, the eastern clouds did burn, and in that fire I saw the omen rise. The green queen's wing eclipsed the newborn skies. O name that stirs the marrow and the blade, O emerald storm by whom the world is flayed. She haunts the vales where silver fountains weep, and in her shadow forest kings do sleep. With venomed fang and tail of barbed despair, she dances death into the perfumed air. I walked alone where elder roots entwine, and birds like prayers fled from the ancient spine of trees who bent in reverent disdain, for wrath of queens no forest can contain. Each step I took was writ in sacred lore, as if my feet had passed this path before. A song of fate, whose chords were drawn and bound to meet beneath the queen's resplendent crown. I came upon her lair by winding trail where sun and silence yielded pale and frail, to incense thick with flame and scale and bone, a nest of ruin carved in rock and stone. There, in the hush, the dragon made her throne, a verdant death with wings of seething jade, whose eyes, twin lanterns, into mine, conveyed an age of wrath too ancient to atone. She saw me. Did I flinch? Not so, for fate was bold. My heart, though trembled, wore its helm of old. With whispered prayer and breath drawn deep and low, I raised my bow against the queen of woe. One. Rathian is known as the Queen of the Skies, a symbol of regal wrath and emerald fire who defends her domain with deadly grace. 2. Her breath burns before the flame appears, scalding the air with venomous heat, a sign of her supernatural nature. 3. The silence before Rathian arrives is unnatural, as if the forest itself holds its breath in reverence and fear. 4. She guards her territory not just with fire but memory, carving ruins into the land as reminders of trespassers past. 5. The hunter's bow, forged of ash and horn, sings like a lark when loosed, but its song fades fast against a queen's fury. 6. The longsword used is an heirloom etched with the grief of fallen kin and the prayers of those who never returned. 7. Raytheon's tail is more feared than her fangs, laced with venom that blooms in the blood like fire through frost. 8. Each strike against her is a verse in a living poem, written not in ink but in blood, flame, and breath. 9. When she roars, the world trembles, not out of volume, but because it feels like time itself has recoiled. 10. Fighting her is not just battle, it is rite, myth, and mourning, echoing deeper than the clash of blade on scale. 11. She does not retreat, not for pain or peril. Her pride is older than fear. 12. Even wounded, she radiates majesty, a being who was born of legend and will die into it. 13. The forest remembers her in scorched trunks, in the stillness after rain, in the dreams of sleeping birds. 14. Killing her feels less like victory and more like elegy, a sacred act filled with awe and sorrow. 15. When she falls, the silence returns, but it is not the same. It is heavier, deeper, as though the world now carries a memory it will never forget.